Good morning, you lovely lot, and a very happy Tuesday to you. Hope you're enjoying our class novel, The Fire Thief. It's getting a bit exciting, isn't it? And today we rejoin the story on chapter 11, back at the Storm Inn, but a little bit later. Now, if you remember, Uncle Edward mentioned something about a boy standing on a burning deck, and Prometheus thinks this could be his hero that he needs to find. I've got a feeling it's all going to go wrong. Let's see. The Storm Inn, a little bit later still. Welcome back. We were in our room at the inn when Uncle Edward mentioned the boy who was standing on the burning deck. More about that later. First, we had to get to Mucklethrift Manor with our coffin, and a big helper like Theus was going to be very useful. Theus was so strong he was able to carry the coffin on one shoulder. Once it was full of Mucklethrift loot, I hoped it would be too heavy for him to carry alone. Too heavy meant we were rich, and Mucklethrift Manor was the best crib we had ever cracked. Cracking a crib is a sort of slang term used by robbers. The idea is this: we use these funny words so the police won't understand what we are talking about when they're spying on us. What is cracking a crib, the spy will say. Hey, maybe I have earwax in my ear. Maybe they are planning to crack a rib. And off they go, thinking we're harmless, when in fact we are rotten robbers about to break into a building. He slid out from under the stage at the end of the Storm Inn room bar. The man with the beard looked over the top of his glasses and sucked on his pipe. It seemed he was an English gentleman who was touring our country to sell his books. The English gentleman had a clever pen that carried its own ink. He called it a fountain pen. It was nice and had a shiny golden nib. Maybe, if we had time, we could steal it from his room before we fled from Eden City. Sorry, I just can't help myself. Ugly little January Storm watched us. She had hate-filled eyes and bottle-filled hands. She was putting the bottles on the shelf ready for when the customers started to arrive. She looked like a lizard with toothache. We stepped into the damp night air. Fog drifted off the river, and the gas lamps at the street corners did little to chase the shadows. The shadows were Eden City's shadows, and they lapped up light like hungry cats lapped up a saucer of blood. We kept the wooden sidewalks and kept out of the way of carriages that rattled past too fast. If I was ever to be mayor of the town, I'd make a law against speeding. I'll have traffic policemen on bicycles to catch the culprits and make them pay a fine. Of course, I'll never be mayor, so it'll never happen. Grey-faced people hurried through the streets while Theus seemed to wander round in wonder. He looked through all the windows of the candlelit rooms. One house looked no bigger than a cottage. Peeling paint was fading on the front wall. It had been painted to look like a gingerbread house with cherry cakes and tasty tarts dripping from the barley sugar roof. I'd seen a cottage like that before, but where? The painting on the front was faded and dirty. A cracked sign on the door said Mrs. Waters, Wonderful World for Children, the nicest nursery in town. Then I remembered where I'd seen the cottage before. It was in an old book of fairy tales, and it was the Wicked Witch's lair. The windows were thick with grime. With a free hand, Theus rubbed the pane of one of the windows and peered in. I crept under the coffin he was holding up and peered through. There were about 10 cradles on bare wooden floors of thick dust and spider webs. Each cradle held a pale baby in a grimy shawl. Some were shrivelled as monkeys, some as still as cod on a fishmonger's slab, and some were making tiny squawks from dribbling mouths. "What's that?" I asked. Uncle Edward nodded towards the sign on the door. "Mrs. Waters, baby farmer," he read. "She grows babies, like a farmer," Theus whispered. "She can't do that. Only God can make humans." Uncle Edward shook his head. "She takes unwanted babies. She looks after them for the rest of their lives. The parents pay Mrs. Waters to take them off their hands." "They must pay her a lot. Babies need looking after for years." Uncle Edward had a round and jolly face. Strangers meet him and they want to smile. But that night, in the pale green glow of the gaslight, he looked haunted. "The babies don't last long in her care," he said. "They soon die. She doesn't have to keep them for long. I found you in the orphanage, Jim, but the orphanage is for children with no parents. The orphanage is bad enough. The baby farms are 100 times worse." Suddenly a door opened, and into the room full of cots, the candle flickered and a woman marched in like a yellow-haired hag from a fairy tale. She walked over to the cot of a crying baby, shook it roughly and shouted at the child to go to sleep. Then she looked up and suddenly saw our stares. She turned away, red eyes on us, and shouted to go away. Theus staggered back and dropped the coffin. "Where did I go wrong?" he breathed. We carried on along the sidewalk. "It's not your fault, my boy," Uncle Edward said. "Oh, but it is," Theus said. "I wanted Earth to be heavenly for humans. It was never meant to end like this." Somewhere in the distant blackness a woman screamed and a cat yowled. The foghorn on the river moaned. "Things look better in the daylight," Uncle Edward said. "They do," said a voice from down by our feet. A man lay in a doorway covered by a thin blanket. His hair was colourless and his eyes covered by dark glasses. "Sorry," I said. "Don't say sorry," the man said, chuckling. You didn't actually stand on me. But if you feel really sorry, you could give me some of your gold, and even a bit of silver would buy me a warm mug of ale." "I don't have any money," I said. "We don't give money to beggars," Uncle Edward said, tugging at my sleeve. "Blind beggar, if you don't mind. I'm a poor blind beggar. You can give me money to me because I can't see to work." "Oh, I'm sorry," I said. "That's all right," the blind beggar said. "Mind how you go. We don't want you dropping that coffin, do we? I may be blind, but I'm still better off than the corpse in the coffin. That's the way I look at it." "True," I said. "Good night, sir." "Good night," the man cried after us. We stopped at the corner and Theus looked at me. "If he was blind, how did he know I was carrying a coffin?" "He isn't blind," Uncle Edward said. "He said he was," Theus argued. "He lied." "Liars and baby farmers, what sort of world is this?" We passed the factory gates where the tops of the tall chimneys vanished into the thick night air. The gates of the factory were painted proudly with the name in great gold letters, Mucklethrift's Machines. The door swung open and we saw inside the ruby-red glow of the furnaces that roared and spewed their smoke. Machines clattered and wheels whirred and flickered in the red light. Ragged children staggered out through the gates, coughing and limping. They'd been working 14 hours without a break. Uncle Edward explained before Theus could ask. He broke into the poem. He knew lots of poems, one for every place we went. "Mother, I cannot mind my wheel, my fingers ache and my lips are dry. Oh, if you felt the pain I feel, but oh, whoever felt as I." Then Theus said that curious thing again. "It was never meant to end like this." He added an even stranger thing. "Where are the gods? How could they let this happen?" What we didn't know then was it was the gods who had made it happen, and it all began back in Greece 1,000,000 years ago. And chapter 12 is called Greece in the Palace of Zeus on Mount Olympus. See you all tomorrow, guys. Have a great day. See you soon.